I'm Caroline, 34 female. I live in a city where the cost of living feels like a vertical line on a graph. For the last 12 years, my life has been a quiet spreadsheet of income, expenses, and aggressive savings goals. As a senior data analyst for a major tech firm, I'm good with numbers. They're clean, logical, and they don't lie. My job is to find the story in the data, and the story of my own life was one of relentless, single-minded focus. It was all for a single goal: a house. Not just any house, but a place that was truly mine, a sanctuary built not on a loan from family or a shared mortgage, but on the foundation of my own hard work. This is the story of how I finally achieved that dream, and how the celebration of that achievement turned into the loneliest night of my life, revealing a betrayal so deep it nearly broke me. It's the story of how my own family tried to take everything from me, and how I had to learn to build a new foundation, both for my house and for my life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The dream didn't start with a specific image, but with a feeling: security. Growing up, our family life felt perpetually unstable. My father, Jack, was a contractor, and his income was a roller coaster of feast or famine. Some years were great, with new trucks and family vacations. Others were lean, filled with hushed arguments over bills at the kitchen table. My mother, who passed away when I was in college, was the glue that held it all together, but her absence left a void that was quickly filled with my father's anxieties and my younger brother Jonathan's growing sense of entitlement. Jonathan was the artist, the dreamer. He floated through life on a cloud of potential, a concept my father seemed to invest in more heavily than any stock or bond. I was the practical one, the one who got scholarships, the one who started working part-time at 16 and never stopped. My first full-time job out of college felt like a miracle. The steady paycheck, the benefits, the 401k. It was a language of stability I had craved my entire life. While my peers were renting trendy downtown apartments and traveling the world, I was living with 3 roommates in a cramped walk-up, driving a 10-year-old sedan, and automating a transfer of 40% of my paycheck into a high-yield savings account the second it landed. My friends would gently tease me, calling me a hermit, asking when I was going to live a little. I'd just smile and say, "I'm investing in my future." What I didn't say was that I was trying to build a fortress against the chaos of my past. For 12 years, that fortress grew brick by digital brick. I climbed the corporate ladder, moving from a junior analyst to a senior position with a team under me. My salary grew, and so did my savings. I became an expert in the local real estate market, tracking trends, studying neighborhoods, and learning the difference between cosmetic fixes and foundational rot. I sacrificed. I said no to countless dinners, concerts, and weekend trips. I patched my own clothes, learned to cook every meal at home, and found my entertainment in free library books and park trails. There were lonely nights when I'd scroll through photos of my friends in Paris or on a beach in Thailand and feel a pang of regret, a flicker of doubt. Was I missing out on my youth? But then I would open my banking app, look at the number I had painstakingly cultivated, and the feeling would subside. That number wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was a future where no one could ever pull the rug out from under me again. When the account finally crossed the $1 million mark, a combination of my savings, disciplined investing, and a final, significant bonus from work, I felt a quiet, profound sense of victory that no vacation photo could ever capture. I had done it. The house hunt began in earnest. I wasn't looking for a mansion or a palace. I was looking for a home. I wanted a garden where I could plant tomatoes and herbs. I wanted a kitchen with an island where friends could gather. I wanted a spare room for a home office and another that could, one day, maybe be a nursery or a guest room for visiting family. I wanted a sturdy roof, good plumbing, and a sense of peace. After 3 months of searching, I found it. It was a 1920s craftsman-style house on a tree-lined street in a quiet, established suburb. It had a wide front porch with a swing, original hardwood floors that creaked with character, and a backyard with a massive, ancient oak tree that provided a canopy of shade. The kitchen was updated, the windows were new, but the soul of the house was intact. The moment I walked in, I could breathe. This was it. This was the place I had worked for. This was my sanctuary. The price was at T. The very top of my budget, a cool $1.1 million. The down payment would gut my savings, but I had planned for it. I could afford the mortgage. I put in an offer, and after a tense week of negotiations, it was accepted. The day I signed the final papers, my hand trembled slightly. I walked out of the lawyer's office clutching a set of keys and sat in my old, beat-up car, and for the first time in my adult life, I cried tears of pure, unadulterated joy. I called my dad first. "I did it, Dad, I got the house." "That's great, sweetie, just great," he said. His voice was warm, but there was an odd, distant quality to it. I chalked it up to surprise. $1 million, huh? That's a lot of house for one person. I ignored the subtle dig. I want to have a housewarming party, a big one, for the whole family. I want everyone to come and celebrate. Next, I called Jonathan. His reaction was even less enthusiastic. "Wow, Caroline, must be nice," he said, the sarcasm dripping from his words. "While the rest of us are struggling to pay rent, you're buying up mansions." "It's not a mansion, Jonathan," I said, my good mood starting to fray. "It's a home, and I worked for it. I want you to be there to celebrate with me." Yeah, I'll see if I can get the night off from the coffee shop," he mumbled, before ending the call. Despite their lukewarm responses, I was determined to share my joy. This wasn't just my victory, I wanted it to be a victory for our family. A sign that one of us had finally found solid ground. I spent 2 weeks cleaning, painting, and unpacking. I sent out beautiful, printed invitations to everyone: my dad, my brother and his girlfriend, my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I invited my close friends and colleagues, including my best friend, Juliet. The date was set for a Saturday night. I pictured the house filled with light and laughter, the rooms buzzing with conversation, the smell of good food in the air. I envisioned my father standing on the back patio, smiling with pride. I even held onto a sliver of hope that Jonathan would see the house, understand the years of effort it represented, and finally feel happy for me. The day of the party, I woke up with a nervous flutter of excitement. I spent the entire day preparing. I hired a catering service for the main dishes, but insisted on making my favorite appetizers and desserts myself. I bought expensive wine, craft beer, and everything needed for a full bar. I arranged bouquets of fresh flowers in every room. I created a playlist of upbeat, happy music. By 7:00 p.m., the house was perfect. The lights were warmly lit, candles flickered on the mantel, and the buffet table was groaning under the weight of delicious food. I stood in the middle of my beautiful new living room, smoothing down my dress, my heart full to bursting. I had built this, all of it, and now I was ready to share it. I watched the clock, waiting for the first doorbell ring, ready for the celebration to begin. The digital clock on the oven glowed 7:30 p.m. The party was supposed to have started half an hour ago. I walked over to the front window, peering through the blinds at the empty street. It was a crisp autumn evening, and streetlights cast a golden, hazy glow onto the fallen leaves. No headlights turned onto my street. No car doors slammed shut. There were just the familiar sounds of a quiet suburban night. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in my stomach. It was probably just traffic. Yes, that was it. A lot of my family lived across town, and rush hour could be unpredictable, even on a weekend. I took a deep breath, walked back to the kitchen, and checked on the food. The miniature quiches were perfectly golden, the shrimp cocktail was glistening on its bed of ice, and the crock-pot of slow-cooked brisket was sending a mouth-watering aroma through the house. Everything was ready. All that was missing were the people. I picked up my phone, no missed calls, no text messages. I scrolled through my recent messages, rereading the enthusiastic "can't wait" and "see you there" replies I had received from my cousins and aunts earlier in the week. Surely someone would have called if they were running late. At 8:00 p.m., the knot in my stomach had grown into a heavy stone. The playlist I'd so carefully curated had cycled through a dozen upbeat songs, but the silence between the tracks felt cavernous. I poured myself a glass of wine, my hand shaking slightly. I walked through the downstairs rooms of my new house, my heels clicking on the pristine hardwood floors. I saw the stacks of clean plates, the neatly folded napkins, the rows of polished wine glasses. I had set up extra seating in the living room and on the back deck, anticipating a crowd. Now, the empty chairs looked like silent, judgmental spectators. The sheer absurdity of the situation began to set in. This wasn't just a few guests running late. This was everyone. Not a single person had shown up. My best friend, Julie. Et had texted me earlier in the afternoon saying she was terribly sorry, but she had been called into an emergency deposition for a major case and wouldn't be able to get away. I had been disappointed but understood completely. Her job as a lawyer was demanding. But my family, all of them, what were the odds that every single aunt, uncle, cousin, and even my own father and brother had a simultaneous, last-minute emergency? At 8:15 p.m., I started making calls. I tried my Aunt Carol first. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, Auntie, it's Caroline, just checking to see if you're on your way. Hope everything is okay. Call me back." Next, my cousin Mark. He actually answered, but his voice was strained and rushed. "Oh, hey, Caroline, shoot, I'm so sorry. Something came up with the kids. We can't make it tonight." "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice tight with forced concern. Yeah, fine. Just, kid stuff. We'll have to celebrate with you another time. Gotta go." He hung up before I could say another word. The excuse felt thin, flimsy. I tried my father's phone, straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice starting to crack. "Dad, where are you? The party started over an hour ago. Please call me." I didn't bother calling Jonathan. By 9:00 p.m., the reality was undeniable. No one was coming. The initial anxiety had morphed into a chilling mix of confusion and humiliation. I felt like I was in some bizarre nightmare. Had I gotten the date wrong? I pulled up the invitation on my computer. No, it was correct. Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Had something terrible happened? A citywide catastrophe I was somehow unaware of? I checked the local news on my phone. Nothing. Just a story about a high school football game and the weekend weather forecast. This was intentional. The realization landed not with a bang, but with a cold, sickening trickle. This was a coordinated act. They had all decided together not to come. The effort it must have taken was staggering. The phone calls, the text chains, the agreement to collectively abandon me on what was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It would have been kinder to RSVP no. It would have been kinder to tell me they weren't coming. The silence, the empty house, the mountains of untouched food, that was a message. It was a statement of profound and deliberate rejection. I walked over to the buffet table and stared at the beautiful, elaborate spread. I had spent so much money, so much time, so much care. I picked up a single, perfect strawberry from the top of the cheesecake I had baked myself. I put it in my mouth, but it tasted like ash. My appetite was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching emptiness. I blew out the candles, their hopeful little flames extinguishing into thin wisps of smoke. I turned off the music, plunging the house into an oppressive silence. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I began the slow, heartbreaking task of cleaning up. I scraped entire platters of untouched food into trash bags. I poured unopened bottles of wine down the drain, the glugging sound echoing in the silent kitchen. Each dish I washed, each glass I dried, felt like an act of erasing my own hope and excitement. I was dismantling the evidence of my own foolishness, forever believing they would be happy for me. I worked methodically, robotically, my mind blessedly numb. It was easier to focus on the physical tasks than to let the full weight of the betrayal crush me. But as I sealed the last garbage bag, heavy with the wasted feast, the numbness finally gave way. A single, hot tear rolled down my cheek, then another. Soon, I was sobbing, my body shaking with silent, racking grief. I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the cold tile floor. I was all alone in my magnificent $1 million house. I had built my fortress, but I had never imagined I'd be its only prisoner. Surrounded by the pristine, empty rooms that were supposed to be filled with love and laughter, I felt a loneliness so profound it felt like a physical wound. I had my dream house, my security, my solid ground. And in a single, silent evening, I had lost my entire family. I sat there for what felt like hours, surrounded by the ghosts of a celebration that never happened, my own quiet sobs the only sound to fill the vast, empty space. The house was dark and silent, scrubbed clean of any evidence of the party that wasn't. I had finally cried myself out, leaving me in a state of exhausted, hollowed-out calm. I was curled up on my new sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the blank television screen when my phone, which had been silent for hours, suddenly buzzed to life on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a picture of my father. For a moment, I just stared at it. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to throw the phone against the wall and let him languish in the silence he and the rest of the family had imposed. And me, but a deeper, more wounded part of me, the part that still desperately wanted a rational explanation, took over. Maybe there had been a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe there was a reason, a single, logical reason that could explain this collective cruelty. My thumb hovered over the screen before finally swiping to answer. "Hello," I said. My voice was raspy, fragile. "Caroline, hey, sweetie, just calling to check in." My dad's voice was casual, almost breezy, as if he were calling on a random Tuesday afternoon. There was no apology, no urgency. The sheer normalcy of his tone was like a slap in the face. "Check in," I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. "You're just checking in? Dad, the party was tonight. Where were you? Where was everybody?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. He sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound I knew all too well. It was the sigh he used when he was about to avoid a conflict, the sigh that preceded a weak excuse or a change of subject. "Yeah, about that," he started, his voice losing its forced cheerfulness. "Things got a little complicated." "Complicated?" I nearly shouted the word. What is complicated about showing up to your own daughter's housewarming party? Or at the very least, calling to say you're not coming? I was here, Dad. Alone, I cooked for 30 people. The house was decorated. I waited for hours. Not one person came. Not one person called. Do you have any idea how that feels? The words tumbled out of me, a torrent of hurt and anger I couldn't hold back. I could hear him shifting uncomfortably on the phone. "Now, calm down, Caroline. There's no need to get hysterical." "Don't you dare tell me to calm down," I hissed, my voice trembling with rage. "I have every right to be hysterical. I deserve an explanation." He sighed again, longer this time. "It's your brother, Jonathan." Of course, it was. It always was. My entire life, Jonathan's feelings, his needs, his dramas had taken precedence. He was the sun around which our small family solar system revolved, and my dad was the planet caught most firmly in his gravitational pull. "What about Jonathan?" I asked, my voice turning cold and flat. "Well, he's a little upset about this whole house thing," Dad said, choosing his words carefully. Upset, he was upset, so he convinced the entire family to ghost me. What could he possibly be upset about? That I worked hard, that I saved my money, that I achieved a goal I've had my entire life. "It's not that simple," Dad hedged. He feels like you didn't consider him." I let out a laugh, but it was a bitter, ugly sound. Consider him? How? Was I supposed to buy a duplex? Was I supposed to ask his permission to spend the money that I earned? What are you talking about? Then came the words that would change everything. The words that would reframe the entire evening from an act of petty jealousy into something far more sinister and calculated. Dad took a deep breath, like a man about to dive into cold water. "Your brother thinks the house should be his." The silence that followed was absolute. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The statement was so audacious, so utterly delusional, that my brain struggled to process it. It was like he had told me the sky was green. "What did you just say?" I finally managed to whisper. He feels that, as the man of the family, he should have been the one to get a house first, Dad explained, his voice now low and apologetic, as if he were delivering bad news that he secretly agreed with. He's an artist, Caroline. He needs a stable place to create. You have your career, you're stable. He thinks you should have helped him get a place before you bought something so extravagant for yourself. I was reeling, my mind racing to catch up with the sheer insanity of his words. The man of the family? Dad, he's 31 years old and works part-time at a coffee shop. I paid for this house with my own money, every single cent. What does he have to do with any of it? He thinks you were selfish, Dad mumbled, the words barely audible. He told everyone. He told them that you were flaunting your wealth and that buying this house was a slap in the face to him and his struggles. It was all starting to make a horrifying kind of sense. The flimsy excuses, the coordinated silence. Jonathan hadn't just been jealous, he had been actively campaigning against me. He had twisted my success into an act of aggression against him, painting me as the villain and himself as the victim. And the family, our family, had bought it. They had chosen his narrative over my reality. "And you," I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "What do you think, Dad? Do you think the house should be his?" He stammered, caught in the trap. "Well, no, of course not. It's your house. You bought it, but you have to see it from his perspective. It's hard for him. You've always been the one who had it easy." Easy? I choked on the word. I worked 12 years for this. I sacrificed everything. You saw it. You saw me working 2 jobs in college. You saw me living with roommates for a decade. You saw the old car I still drive. There was nothing easy about it. "All I'm saying," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone, "is that you need to be the bigger person here. You're the successful one. You should call him, talk it out. Maybe you can help him out a little. Smooth things over." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It was the final, crushing confirmation that in my father's eyes, my role was not to be celebrated, but to be the eternal caretaker of my brother's fragile ego. My success wasn't my own. It was a resource to be distributed, a prize to be shared with the less fortunate, less motivated member of the family. He didn't see a daughter to be proud of. He saw a solution to his son's problems. "No," I said, the word as cold and hard as stone. "I will not be calling him, and I am done being the bigger person. The bigger person gets stepped on." Before he could respond, before he could offer another weak platitude or ask me to sacrifice another piece of myself for Jonathan's sake, I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. Then, with a chilling sense of purpose, I blocked Jonathan's number too. The hurt from the empty party was gone, burned away by the white-hot fire of rage. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about my life, my work, my very identity. They thought they could erase me, boycott me into submission, and bully me out of my own dream. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The morning after the party, the house felt different. The beautiful, sunlit rooms that had once felt so full of promise now seemed to echo with the ghosts of my family's betrayal. The anger from my father's phone call had cooled overnight, leaving behind a hard, dense core of resolve. I wasn't just going to be angry. I was going to understand the full scope of what had happened. I needed to know how deep the rot went. My first call was to Juliet. I laid out the whole story, from the empty house and melted ice to the unbelievable phone call with my dad. Her reaction was a satisfying explosion of righteous fury. "He said what?" she yelled into the phone, and I had to pull it away from my ear. "The house should be his, because he's the man of the family." Caroline, that is the most archaic, misogynistic, and utterly delusional thing I have ever heard. Are they living in the 18th century? "Apparently," I said, a small, wry smile touching my lips for the first time in 24 hours. Having someone in my corner, someone whose immediate reaction was outrage on my behalf, felt like a life raft. "Okay," she said, her voice shifting from furious friend to sharp-witted lawyer. "This isn't just a family squabble anymore. This is a coordinated harassment campaign. You need to protect yourself and you need information. Don't engage with your father or Jonathan directly. Let them stew. You need to find out exactly what was said and who said it. Juliet's advice was the anchor I needed. My mind, trained to find patterns in data, kicked into gear. I wasn't dealing with a simple emotional problem, I was dealing with a data problem. The data points were lies, and I needed to collect them to see the full picture. I started with the family members I considered the weakest links, the ones who were more likely to follow the crowd than lead it, and therefore more likely to crack under a little direct pressure. I decided to call my cousin, Sarah. We had always been close, or so I had thought. I unblocked her number and dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice immediately flustered. "Caroline, I was just about to call you. I am so sorry about last night. Little Timmy came down with a horrible stomach flu, and we were up all night with him." The lie was so practiced, so smooth, it almost sounded convincing. But I wasn't the same person I was yesterday. "That's a shame," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Because Mark told me he couldn't come because of kid stuff, too. And Aunt Carol's voicemail said she had a migraine. It seems there was a whole epidemic of sudden illnesses in our family yesterday evening. What a coincidence." There was dead silence on the other end. I let it stretch, knowing that the first person to speak would lose. Finally, Sarah cracked. "Oh, Caroline," she whispered, her voice thick with guilt. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to be a part of it, I swear." "Part of what, Sarah?" I asked, my tone clinical. "Tell me exactly what happened." And then, it all came pouring out. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. According to Sarah, Jonathan had convened a family meeting at my father's house the week before my party. I hadn't been invited, of course. It was a secret summit designed to address the problem of my new house. Jonathan, with my father sitting by his side in silent, passive agreement, had spun an elaborate and malicious fiction. He told the assembled family, our aunts, uncles, and cousins, that my father had a secret inheritance fund set aside for both of us. He claimed that this fund was meant to provide the down payment on a first home for each of his children. He then alleged that I, knowing about this fund, had gone behind everyone's back, emotionally manipulated our aging father, and convinced him to give me the entire sum, Jonathan's half included, to buy my $1 million mansion. He painted me as a greedy, backstabbing thief. He described himself as the wronged party, a struggling artist whose dream of homeownership had been stolen by his cold, calculating sister. He played on their sympathies, talking about his financial struggles, his artistic aspirations, and his desire to start a family with his girlfriend. A family he now couldn't provide a proper home for, thanks to me. The story was, from start to finish, a complete and utter fabrication. There was no inheritance fund. My mother had left very little, and my father's retirement was a modest pension and social security. The money for my house had come from my salary, my bonuses, my investments, the fruits of 12 years of relentless work, which everyone in that room had witnessed. But Jonathan's story was juicier. It was more dramatic. It provided a villain, me, and a victim, him, a narrative that was far more compelling than the boring truth of my fiscal discipline. "Why didn't anyone call me?" I asked Sarah, my voice shaking with a fresh wave of betrayal. Why didn't a single person in that room stand up and question this insane story? "Jonathan was very convincing," Sarah said weakly. "And your dad? He just sat there and nodded along. He didn't say it was true, but he didn't say it was false either. Everyone just assumed. If your own father wasn't defending you, it must be true." That was the deepest cut of all. My father's silence had been his contribution. He hadn't told the lie, but he had sanctioned it. He had allowed his son to assassinate my character in his own living room, and he hadn't uttered a single word in my defense. The final piece of the puzzle was the boycott. It had been Jonathan's grand idea. He had declared that as a family, they needed to show solidarity. He told them that attending my housewarming would be an endorsement of my theft and a betrayal of him. He framed it as a moral stand. Don't go to the party. Give her the cold shoulder. Let her sit alone in her stolen castle and think about what she's done. He had convinced them that this act of collective cruelty was somehow a righteous one. After I hung up with Sarah, I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just jello. See, this was a premeditated, calculated conspiracy to isolate and punish me for my own success. It was an attempt to rewrite history and reality to fit a narrative where I was the villain. And the most terrifying part was how easily it had worked. How quickly my own family had been willing to believe the worst of me, all based on the lies of a man-child who couldn't stand to see his sister succeed. I sat in my quiet, sun-drenched kitchen, a place I had dreamed of for years, and felt the walls closing in. The house was mine, but the foundation of my life, my family, had been revealed to be nothing but sand. They hadn't just skipped a party. They had tried to tear down everything I had built. The rage and grief that had been churning inside me for 2 days finally coalesced into something cold, hard, and clear. A plan. They had declared war on me, and I was not going to be a passive victim. My conversation with Juliet had been the catalyst. Her legal mind cut through the emotional fog and laid out a path forward. This wasn't about winning them back. It was about protecting what was mine and making it clear that I could not be broken. The next phase of my life would be about fortification, both literally and figuratively. My first action was to secure the perimeter. That very afternoon, I called a highly rated local security company. The next morning, a team was at my house. They installed a comprehensive system, high-definition cameras covering every entrance and the entire perimeter of the property, motion-activated floodlights, and a state-of-the-art alarm system connected directly to the local police department. They also installed a video doorbell, which felt like the most critical piece of the puzzle. I would never again be caught off guard by an unwanted visitor. As the technicians worked, drilling holes and running wires, I felt a sense of control returning. Each new camera was an eye watching over me, each new sensor was a guard. It was an expensive and sad necessity, turning my dream home into a secure compound, but the peace of mind it brought was priceless. Next, I had all the locks on the house rekeyed. It was a simple, practical step, but the symbolism was powerful. I was revoking any and all presumed access. No one from my past life would ever be able to just drop by again. With the physical fortress established, it was time to build the legal one. Juliet came over that evening with a bottle of wine and her laptop. We sat at my large kitchen island, the same one I had envisioned hosting family dinners at, and transformed it into a war room. "Okay," she said, pulling up a document. "First things first, communication. From this moment on, you do not speak to your father or Jonathan on the phone unless you are recording the call, and even then, I'd advise against it. Everything needs to be in writing. Text messages, emails, we need a paper trail." She helped me draft a single, concise, and legally airtight email. It was addressed to both my father and my brother. It read, "Subject, my property at my address. Jack and Jonathan, it has come to my attention that there are significant and damaging falsehoods being circulated regarding the purchase of my home. To be unequivocally clear, my property was purchased exclusively with my own post-tax income, saved and invested over the past 12 years. There was no family fund, no inheritance money, and no financial contribution of any kind from either of you or any other family member. The coordinated decision to boycott my housewarming event, based on these malicious lies, was a deeply hurtful and unacceptable action. Effective immediately, I am requesting that you cease all communication with me regarding this matter. Furthermore, you are not to come to my property. Any uninvited appearance will be considered trespassing. Any further attempts to harass, intimidate, or slander me will be documented and may result in legal action, including but not limited to a restraining order. This is not a negotiation. This is a final statement. Sincerely, Caroline." Reading it over, I felt a shiver of both fear and empowerment. This was it, the burning of the final bridge. There was no coming back from a letter like this. Juliet watched my face. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Send it." The digital whoosh of the sent email felt as loud as a slamming door. The final step was to build an emotional fortress. I went through my phone and systematically blocked the number of every family member who had participated in the boycott. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins. It was a brutal, painful process, like amputating a part of myself. With each tap of the block button, a memory would flash through my mind. Christmas at Aunt Carol's, summer barbecues with my cousins. But those memories were now tainted, overlaid with the image of them all sitting in my father's living room, nodding along as Jonathan destroyed my reputation. Hay had chosen their side, now I was choosing mine. The following days were quiet. The email had clearly landed like a bomb because the trickle of manipulative texts and guilt-tripping voicemails stopped completely. The silence was a relief, but it was also heavy. I was truly on my own now. During this time, Juliet was my rock. She checked in on me every day. She brought over pizza and movies, refusing to let me wallow in the oppressive silence of the house. She reminded me that the family I had lost was not the family I deserved. "You're not losing a support system, Caroline," she told me one night as we watched a silly comedy. "You're shedding dead weight. You're pruning the diseased branches of the family tree so the healthy ones can grow." Her words stuck with me. Maybe this wasn't just a defense. Maybe it was an opportunity to redefine what family meant. It didn't have to be the one I was born into. It could be the one I chose. It could be built on a foundation of respect, trust, and mutual support, not on obligation and entitlement. A week after I sent the email, I walked out my back door and looked at the large, unkempt patch of earth that I had planned to turn into a vegetable garden. My original vision had been a family project, with my dad helping me build the planter boxes and my cousins' kids helping me plant the seeds. That vision was dead. I went to the hardware store, bought lumber, soil, and seeds. I spent the entire weekend by myself, learning how to use a circular saw and a drill. My hands got blistered and my back ached, but as I assembled the raised beds piece by piece, I felt a sense of fierce pride. I was building something new, something that was entirely mine. As I filled the boxes with rich, dark soil and carefully planted rows of tomato, cucumber, and basil seedlings, I wasn't just planting a garden. I was planting new roots. I was building my fortress, not just with cameras and legal threats, but with soil, wood, and the quiet determination to grow something beautiful in the space where something ugly had been torn away. 2 weeks passed in a state of strange, suspended peace. The silence from my family was absolute. Part of me kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for an escalation, but there was nothing. I started to allow myself to relax, to settle into the rhythms of my new life in my fortified home. I was beginning to believe that my clear, decisive email had worked. I had drawn a line in the sand, and they had, for once, respected it. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work and was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when the chime from my video doorbell echoed through the house. I glanced at the monitor on the wall. My heart stopped. Standing on my front porch were my father and Jonathan. They hadn't rung the bell. They were just standing there, as if waiting for me to psychically sense their presence. Jonathan looked impatient and angry, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, stooped and anxious, wringing his hands. For a moment, I froze. My first instinct was the old one, to open the door, to try and smooth things over, to manage their feelings. But then I saw the security camera lens reflected in the porch light, and I remembered. I was not that person anymore. I walked over to the intercom unit by the door and pressed the talk button. "Can I help you?" My voice came out strong and steady, amplified by the small speaker outside. They both jumped, startled. Jonathan recovered first, striding up to the camera. "Open the door, Caroline. We need to talk." "No," I said simply. "We have nothing to talk about. You received my email. You are trespassing. Please leave." "Don't be ridiculous," Jonathan scoffed, his face contorting with anger. "We are not trespassing. This is a family matter. Now open the door before you make this worse." The only person making this worse is you, I replied, my voice as cold as ice. You have 60 seconds to get off my property before I call the police. My father finally stepped forward, his face a mask of pleading. Caroline, please, he said, his voice tinny through the speaker. Don't be like this, just hear him out. Let's just talk face to face. I am not having a conversation with a man who orchestrated a campaign of lies to turn my entire family against me, I said, my words directed at Jonathan but my eyes, via the camera, on my father. And I'm certainly not having one with the man who stood by and let him do it. Jonathan exploded. You stole my future, he shouted, his voice cracking with a bizarre combination of rage and self-pity. That house was supposed to be mine. Dad was going to help me, but you got in his head, you greedy, selfish. Stop, I interrupted, my voice sharp and loud. Let's be very clear, because this is all being recorded. There was no money, there was no fund, there was no plan for Dad to help you. That was a fantasy you invented because you cannot stand to see me succeed on my own terms. I had an idea. I grabbed my laptop from the counter, pulled up the spreadsheet I had kept for 12 years, a meticulous record of every bonus, every investment, every dollar saved, and I held the screen up to the front door peephole camera. This is where the house came from, Jonathan. It came from my work. It came from my sacrifice, something you know nothing about. He stared at the screen, his face a mixture of confusion and fury. The data didn't fit his narrative. You're lying, he yelled. You're trying to trick us. That was when I turned my full attention to my father. And you, Dad, I said, my voice dropping, filled with all the pain and disappointment that had been building for weeks. You are the biggest coward I have ever known. You let him do this. You let him poison everyone against me because you are too weak to stand up to him. You have failed as a father. You failed my mother's memory. And you have failed me for the last time. A strangled sob escaped my father's lips. He looked utterly broken, but I felt no pity. My pity had been used up, spent on years of catering to their dysfunctions. This is your eviction notice, I said, my voice ringing with finality. I am evicting you both from my property, from my house, and from my life. You have made your choice. You chose his lies over your daughter. Now you can live with that choice. Goodbye. I ended the transmission, cutting off Jonathan's sputtering response. I watched on the monitor as they stood there for another minute, stunned into silence. Jonathan seemed to be arguing with my dad, gesturing wildly at the house. My dad just shook his head, looking defeated. Finally, they turned and walked away, their shoulders slumped. They didn't look back. I stayed at the monitor until their car disappeared down the street. My heart was hammering in my chest, and my hands were shaking, but I wasn't scared. I felt a profound, cleansing sense of release. It was over. The confrontation I had been dreading was over. I had faced them, not with anger, but with the cold, hard, undeniable truth. I had spoken my piece, defended my honor, and taken back my power. I walked through my quiet house, touching the walls, looking out the windows at my garden. It was mine. Unquestionably, unequivocally mine. I had not only bought it with my money, but I had just successfully defended it from the emotional squatters who had tried to claim it. The metaphorical eviction was complete. The house was finally, truly, my sanctuary. And for the first time since I'd moved in, it felt like home. In the weeks and months that followed the confrontation on my doorstep, a new kind of silence descended. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of rejection, but a light, peaceful quiet. The absence of drama was a balm. My phone no longer buzzed with guilt-inducing texts or passive-aggressive voicemails. My email inbox was free of unwanted correspondence. The quiet was a space I could finally fill with my own life, on my own terms. There were moments of grief, of course. They came at unexpected times, seeing a father and daughter laughing in the grocery store, or hearing a song that reminded me of a family road trip from long ago. In those moments, I mourned the family I wished I had, the father I deserved, the brother I once loved. I allowed myself to feel the sadness, to acknowledge the loss, but I no longer allowed it to define me. Grieving them was a necessary part of moving on. My life began to expand in beautiful and unexpected ways. I invested the energy I had once spent managing my family's emotions into my friendships. Juliet and I became even closer, our bond forged in the fire of my family's collapse. My work colleagues, who had only known the professional, focused side of me, were invited over for casual dinners and game nights. They saw the real Caroline, and they liked her. One Saturday, I decided it was time for a do-over. I sent out a new batch of invitations, this time via a simple group text. The message was short and sweet. Official take 2, housewarming barbecue. No gifts, just good company. Come help me break in my new home properly. The guest list was small and carefully curated. It was my chosen family. Juliet, a handful of trusted colleagues, a couple of old friends from college I had reconnected with. The day of the party was the polar opposite of the first. It was relaxed and filled with laughter from the moment the first guest arrived. People gathered in the kitchen, chatting as I cooked. They spilled out onto the back deck, admiring the garden I had built with my own 2 hands. We played music, ate good food, and talked for hours. At one point, I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the deck, just watching. The house was alive. It was filled with the exact energy I had always dreamed of, not the strained obligation of a family gathering, but the genuine warmth of people who were there because they wanted to be. My friend Sarah from work was laughing with Juliet, my old college roommate was playing fetch with his dog in the yard, and the air was filled with the buzz of easy, happy conversation. This was home. This was family. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Juliet found me sitting on the front porch swing, watching the last of the guests leave. "You did it, you know," she said, sitting down beside me. "Bought a house?" I asked with a smile. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You rebuilt. You took a pile of rubble they left behind and you built something stronger. You built a life." She was right. The house had been the catalyst, the thing that forced the rot in my family to the surface. Losing them had been excruciating, but in the space they left behind, something new and far healthier had been allowed to grow. A few months later, a letter arrived. It was from my father. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened, but curiosity won out. I slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs of rambling, self-pitying prose. He wrote that he was sorry for how things turned out, that Jonathan was going through a hard time, and that he hoped one day I could find it in my heart to forgive them. There was no real apology. There was no acknowledgement of the lies, the cruelty, the conspiracy. There was no accountability. It was just another attempt to manage me, to put the onus of reconciliation on me. I read it once, then walked it out to the recycling bin and dropped it in. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet finality. That chapter was closed. My life now is peaceful. I excel at my job, I tend to my garden, and I spend my free time with people who value and respect me. The house has become a true sanctuary, a place of comfort and joy. It is more than just a financial asset, it's a symbol of my resilience. It's a testament to the fact that you can build a beautiful life even after the foundation you started with crumbles. Sometimes I sit on my back patio in the evening, looking up at the branches of the old oak tree, and I think about the 2 parties. The first, a silent, heartbreaking failure. The second, a loud, joyful success. The house was the same, but I was different. I had learned the hardest and most valuable lesson of my life. The strongest walls are not the ones you build to keep the world out, but the boundaries you build to let the right people in. I had my dream house, and I had finally built a life worthy of it. A life founded not on blood, but on love, respect, and a peace I had earned all by myself.